Today is Tuesday, November 15th, and we're taking things one day at a time here on the Outside the Oval podcast, the newest running experience on the internet. You can find my show on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube, as well as Instagram and Twitter at Outside the Oval. And any questions you might have can be directed to my email at outsidetheoval@gmail.com. But joining me today is Jonathan Gault, who works as a staff writer for Let'sRun.com. Jonathan, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, happy to be here, Gavin. Let's talk some cross country.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And for everyone listening, we have finally made it. After weeks of speculation, weeks of discussion and debate, the time has come. In just 4 days, we'll be here in Stillwater, Oklahoma for the NCAA Division I Cross Country National Championships. It's really an exciting time around the sport. And just like Jonathan and Let's Run, they're going to have plenty of content. So Outside the Oval, we got you covered with a ton of content on the social media pages, including predictions, previews, and analysis entering Championship Saturday. So head over to my Instagram and Twitter pages at Outside the Oval and check that stuff out. But now it's time to direct our attention to the two races ahead of us. And that's exactly what Jonathan and I are here to do today. We're going to break down each race, team and individual, and lay out some of our favorites as well as some sleepers while making some predictions along the way. Jonathan, are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Awesome. So starting today's episode, we're going to open it up and with the women's side and talking about the individual race between Caitlin Toohey and Parker Valby. Caitlin, she's really been the overwhelming favorite to take home the individual championship for much of the year. Until about mid-October, when Parker Valby kind of came up on the scene from Florida, she returned and she's won 3 races since, including a 18:25 6K at the SEC Championships. And ever since then, it's really become an enticing debate between the two of these runners. So we'll start here. What are you expecting, Jonathan, from the women's race on the individual side? And do you think this race will truly come down to Caitlin Toohey and Parker Valby?
I think that I'm slightly hesitant to say it's just going to be a two-person race because that we've hyped this up in the past at previous NCAAs. I remember it was Grant Fisher and Justin Knight a couple of years ago. And even going way back, I was talking to Dave Smith from Oklahoma State, the coach there. He said 2009, Jenny Barringer and Susan Keiken. That was the big head-to-head showdown. Both of those women really ended up struggling, blowing up. I think they were really concerned with each other. Angela Bazzari comes in to steal it. So I expect it to be a two-person battle, but I'm hesitant to just say, oh, it's absolutely only going to be those two. But if it is those two, I think the onus is going to be on Parker Valby to take it out and try to drop Caitlin Toohey. That's something she could not do at the NCAA championships on the track earlier this year. It's not something anyone's been able to do to Caitlin Toohey this year in cross country, but that's kind of the style I see her taking on this course, is trying to drop her, and if Toohey's still there with 200 meters to go, that's probably bad news for Parker Valby.
For sure, especially considering we're going to Stillwater with that course we all know is not the easiest course to navigate, and it's going to be interesting to see if Valby is able to actually drop Toohey this time. I'm with you. I think this race does become a two-person race. However, I feel like this also has a race that could be one of those days where neither racer comes out and we see someone like Silly McCabe or Mercy Chillingham or someone else stealing this one. But I do appreciate this matchup we've gotten between these two. Toohey is one of the best women's distance runners we've seen in a long time. She's efficient, strong, and she kind of reminds me a little bit of Krista Schweitzer, shades of her at least. And I think she's following her in a similar trajectory. But I'm taking Parker Valby in the head-to-head matchup, regardless of what happens, whether or not they win. I was at A&M when Parker won her first race, and I was at the South Regional just this weekend. I don't think I've ever seen an individual, man or woman, racer run as strong as Parker Valby ran at that last 1K. Very great to see, and she's proved that she can run out ahead of anyone. She's done it to Mercy Chillingham twice already this year. And Toohey, although a great runner, perhaps generational, I still am going to give the slight advantage to Parker Valby this weekend. And I think she's going to get the job done winning her first NCAA championship. But like you kind of mentioned, there's more to this race than just Parker Valby and Caitlin Toohey. There are several other women in this race who could make a difference and throw these two off their rhythm. So if you think it's a possibility that individual could beat one of these two, who would you think that would be and why?
I think the best candidate to do it is Kaylee McCabe of West Virginia. She hasn't lost this year. She was third last year. And she's known for having a pretty big kick. If you look at what she did at the Big 12 meet against Natalie Cook and Taylor Rowe, two great runners from Oklahoma State, she really crushed them over the last 150 meters or so. And I think if she's able to hang in with those top two, then she could outkick both of them to take the victory. The problem is going to be getting to that point, but she's the one, I think, who has the best chance to upset those top two women if she can hang with them.
Absolutely. She had a great race at the Big 12s, and that's actually where my pick would come from. Instead, I'm going with Natalie Cook. I think she's a legitimate championship contender. What she was able to do at the Cowboy Jamboree was all I needed to see. And despite her fourth-place finish behind McCabe and Rowe at Big 12s, I do think she should be considered the top individual on the women's side outside of Tui and Valby. She has the advantage of training on this course every week, and being able to race on it and win already this season only is a testament to what she's able to do. I also like Kelsey Chimmel and Taylor Rowe. I think those are two other girls that we haven't mentioned who could really throw themselves in the front of this race. But I do think, like I already mentioned, that Parker Valby and Caitlin Tui are going to execute. They're going to do their thing, and it's going to be one of those two taking home the title. But I would not be surprised in the slightest if it was the freshman making her championship debut and winning with the home course advantage. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But
Yeah, she's a huge talent, right? I mean, she's the high school record holder for 5K, and I've talked to her coach, Dave Smith. He's like, I don't understand how she's running this well on as little mileage as she does. You know, it's been 10, 15 miles a week. I think maybe she's going to get up to, maybe she's up to 20 or something this fall, but not, you know, she's running like 4 or 5 days a week, and she's one of the best women in the country. So really has a huge ceiling, and like you said, she's at home. That's going to take let's put some pressure on, but also you've got the comforts at home, you know, the course, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I'm definitely excited to see what she does in her first NCAAs.
For sure. This is definitely a storyline I'm most excited to follow. I'm like you. I've heard the stories about her running 10 to 15 during high school, and just she's in the pool, on the bike, one of the two. And at the end of the day, it's working for her. I'm sure she'll keep doing what she's doing leading up to nationals. But if you take a look on the team side, it's NC State who's been the top dog all year, and there's been a few moments where they've looked extremely vulnerable. For example, at Nuttycombe just a few weeks ago, New Mexico actually they tied them, and it came down to a tiebreaker that NC State did win. And then 2 weeks later at the ACC Championships, Notre Dame, they came just 4 points from getting the job done. But I think the biggest equalizer that we've seen throughout the season, even though NC State has struggled, they still have managed to get the job done, and that's including their 51-point victory this past weekend at the Southeast Regional. So I'll ask you this. Do you believe that NC State, this team, is going to get the job done and complete the repeat, or does someone else come in and steal this victory from them?
They are my pick tentatively for the same reason I picked them to win last year, which was if they have their best day, I think they're better than everyone else. And we may not have seen their best day yet. I think regionals might have been the closest they've got to it. But it's really hard to say, like, I'm looking at their top two. Like, that's just such a huge advantage for them, having Caitlin Tui's probably going to be scoring 1 or 2 points. Kelsey Camille's probably going to be scoring in the single digits. And then Samantha Bush, I think, is probably going to be a top 20. That is the best front three in America, and that can really cover you if you've just got two people who you know are really going to be way, way up there. And I don't think New Mexico does. New Mexico probably has a couple women who might be in the top 20, but I don't know if they have a top 10 woman. And winning without someone in the top 10 is pretty tough to do. So that certainty I really like from NC State, even if there's a little bit more uncertainty for them at 4 and 5 than there is for New Mexico.
Yeah, for sure. I like this NC State team as well, and I do think they're the most talented team. They should go out and win their second straight title Saturday. Now, there are a few reasons that you kind of hit on that this team might not win, like the problems at the 4 and 5, which aren't really problems it wouldn't be a problem for any other team. But when you have Tui and Jamal and Bush all in the front, you can relax and kind of rest easy knowing that you have your front runners getting the job done. I'm not worried about Tui, Jamal, Bush, even Seymour. I really think they're all going to stick in that front pack, or at least the chase pack. And I do trust this team to get the chip off their shoulder and get this job done. But let's say this NC State team, they have another down week. They come out flat and defy our expectations. Who do you think is the team best suited to take down NC State in this situation?
Well, I think it's New Mexico because we saw at the Honeycomb meet, they finished level with them on points. They do have a super deep team. So if they have one or two women who don't have a great day, they're going to be fine. If NC State, one of their top five, has a bad day, they might be in trouble, especially one of their top three. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a bigger problem for NC State than it is for New Mexico, who has people to cover in that position. So, yeah, they've been running really well all season. They've been getting better as the season's been going on. So I think New Mexico would be my pick, but I also think Oklahoma State has a shot to win on their home course because we already talked Natalie Cook and Taylor Rowe. Those are the two of the top women in the country. Their freshman from Kenya, Bila Jepkarui, she's been having a great year. She didn't run the regional meet, but she's going to be there in NCAAs. So that gives them a pretty strong top three. And they've got home course advantage, and this is a really tough course. Everyone who ran it a couple of years ago can tell you, it's hilly. You're going to have to really earn it out there. So I think that probably counts for something as well. So they're a team I could see sneaking in there and winning it as well.
Oh, yeah. You hit on New Mexico and Oklahoma State. Agree with you both there. And then another team I really like is Alabama. They have Mercy Chalanga as a low stick, but they also have three other runners who finished incredibly well at the South region and probably more than capable of finishing inside the top 20. Amaris Tanisma, who finished second at the 2021 cross-country championships at Stillwater, she has shown flashes of her old self, and she's looked incredible as of late, and that's before we even talk about the Crimson Tide's new standout freshman, Hilda Olamayo. I do foresee Alabama jumping New Mexico or beating NC State. I don't imagine that's going to happen. But I do think they have a chance to be a podium team and even compete for that second place finish. But now that we're done talking about the women, I think it's fair we spend some time on the men's race, which is one us around the sport have spent a lot of time talking about this year. There's really been no clear favorite in the individual side of things, so that's where we will begin today. And with so much variety and no clear favorite to win the men's individual championship, who do you think some of the top contenders are in this race?
Yeah, I think there's 4 or 5 guys, maybe half a dozen guys who have a real legitimate shot to win, which is a lot more than you usually get in a meet like this. I would say Nico Young from NAU. He's run 13:11 for 5K. He's been running well this year. He was 4th as a freshman on this course in 2020. So he's certainly up there. Alex Mayer, who won the Cowboy Jamboree here back in September. He's the NCAA runner-up in the 10K. He's a big threat to win from Oklahoma State. And then Charles Hicks from Stanford, Kai Robinson from Stanford. They've been at the front of pretty much every race they've been in the last few years. And then there's one other guy, Alabama's Victor Kiprop. He has not lost a race all fall. So I think any of those 5 guys, it wouldn't surprise me if they won it. But I also think it's possible we could see a real dark horse from outside that group win as well. If there's 5 or 6 guys still in the pack with a couple 100 meters to go, I wouldn't be a total shock if some outsider came in and won as well.
I'm with you. I think this conversation starts with 2 people, Alex Mayer and Nico Young, who both you included. And then I think you can also expand it slightly to Charles Hicks and Alabama's Victor Kiprop and even Kai Robinson, who you talked about a little bit. There's a lot of like about these guys, and I believe most likely champion is going to come from this group of 5. Mayer, he dominated the Cowboy Jamboree earlier this season, taking down Hicks and Young in the process, and he's been incredibly consistent. And not only that, he has a home course advantage, and we're going to keep harping on that because I think it's so important on such a difficult course. And then you have Charles Hicks, who's been just as consistent as Mayer. Nico Young, he's shown flashes of dominance as of late, winning the Big Sky in dominating fashion. And then he went 28:01 just this weekend at the Mountain Regional, right there with his teammate Drew Bosley, who I think is another dark horse candidate. And then Victor Kiprop, who's managed to go quietly undefeated this season in 5 races. And that's including wins at Joe Pine SEC Championships and the South Regional. And that goes without saying that he beat Dylan Jacobs, the 10K national championship champion on the track 3 times. So I'm not really sure what's going to take to win this championship, but I do think there's a handful of runners who are capable of pulling it off. And that's where we'll go next. I think there's more runners who will have that potential to win. So, Jonathan, who are some of your sleepers in this race that you think could interrupt what's happening up front or simply finish better than what people are expecting them to finish?
Yeah, there's a few guys. I don't know how much of a sleeper you can call them, because these three guys I was going to highlight all won their regional, but I don't think they've been in the individual title contender conversation so far. And that's Nicholas Scudder from Charlotte. He's won all of his races this year except the Notre Dame invite, where he lost to Victor Kiprop, which is a guy that we already talked about as an individual contender. That's a pretty strong track record going into NCAA. So I think he could do something. Brian Fay from Washington, he's run 13:16 on the track. He was the West Region champion, and he kind of got a late start on this season because he was competing at the European Championships for Ireland, but he's been improving, and I think he's talented enough to mix it up with the very top guys. And then there's one other guy, Isai Rodriguez from Oklahoma State. He was fourth here in 2018 as a redshirt freshman. Now he's running 4 years later. He's only run a couple times this fall, but he's a gamer. If he's up in the front, he's always going to go for the win. So those are three guys I think could kind of mix things up.
Absolutely. I love that list of three. And if we take a look down the page further, I think you can consider Dylan Jacobs a sleeper, even though he's the 10K national champion. He's looked great for much of the season, and he's just starting to come in his own. Struggled out the gates, and it's really improved since. And then this weekend, it didn't really look like Jacobs was pressing too hard when I was watching the recap over on YouTube. And on the way home from Huntsville, I was about 60, 90 seconds back from the action, but I don't doubt that Jacobs could have went and made a move with Kiprop down the home stretch based on what I was watching on YouTube. And then elsewhere, I think Bob Liking from Wisconsin and Carter Solomon from Notre Dame are two other names I'd like to bring up. I think neither of them had to work very hard at the Great Lakes Regional, and then entering Saturday's championship, they should be pretty fresh. Liking, he finished fourth at Nuttycombe, and then Carter Solomon, that was the same breakout race he had. He finished ninth, and then he went on to beat Parker Wolf in Charlottesville in the ACC championships. So, and if you have much faith in how long that last 1K is of that course, he went 2:39 over the course of the final 1K. So I'm not saying that Solomon is going to be the biggest surprise, and I kind of compare him to Patrick Tiernan from Villanova when he won in 2016. But I do think if Solomon's in the race late, he's someone capable of kicking down everyone and winning this one. But whether or not he gets to the point of the race where he can assert himself up front, that remains to be seen. But he's more than capable of outkicking anyone in this field. Which does bring me to my last question I have for this men's individual race. And it's an easy one. With all the possible contenders, the intrigue for this race is through the roof. Who do you think is going to bring home the men's team championship this Saturday?
Team championship. I think Stanford has to be the favorites, right? They won the Nuttycombe Invitational. When you score 54 points like they did, usually that means you're the favorite to win the national title. They have that really rock-solid top three with Charles Hicks, Kai Robinson, and Cole Sprout. Though Cole Sprout didn't run regionals. So if he doesn't run NCAAs, all bets are off. But if those three are together, that's the best top three in the country. And then their 4 and 5 guys who have needed to step up have stepped up. Micah, Boyden, Rousseau, and some of those other guys on the team, Thomas Boyden, they're starting to run like their track PRs suggest they're capable of running. So I think they have to be the pick, but I think there are several teams that could upset them. I think Oklahoma State, BYU, and even NAU, if they all have their best day, they're capable of winning.
For sure. And I apologize. I skipped over a whole question. We'll circle back to the last question I have for the individual championship. But yeah, absolutely. I agree with what you said there. And outside of the top 4 teams between Northern Arizona, Oklahoma State, BYU, and Stanford, are there any teams you think that are capable of grabbing one of those 4 podium spots or even competing for a number 2 or 3 spot on Saturday?
Yeah, totally. I mean, those 4 on paper, they would seem like an easy top 4, but this is the NCAA meet. Usually things don't go exactly according to form. So I think there are a few contenders. Tulsa, they're really, really good through 4. They just haven't been able to find a number 5 guy consistently. But at the NCAAs, if you have top 4 guys way up there, you can get on the podium if your 5th guy isn't that far up. So I think they've got a great shot. I think Air Force has a shot. They're really deep. And if one of their guys can kind of step up and finish in the top 15 or 20, they could get on the podium. And then two other conference champions, Wake Forest and Wisconsin. They both looked really good at their conference meets. Wake Forest didn't look super convincing at the Southeast Regional, but they beat a bunch of very good teams at ACCs fairly comfortably. So I think those two teams, if they have their best day, look at Wisconsin. They really packed things up at regionals, and they had like a 1 second spread from 1-6 and won that race pretty convincingly at the Great Lakes. So both of those teams, I think, have a shot as well.
For sure. Personally, I love Wake Forest, the team that you mentioned, and I wouldn't be surprised if this team ended up on the podium. On a great day, like they had at the ACC Championships, they have a pretty solid top 3, and then they also have a number 4 and 5 capable of scoring inside the top 60, which is super important. Zach Fascioni, Aaron Lasseres, and Thomas Van Open, they've been spectacular this year. I don't think it would be too out of blue for them to go out and steal a spot from maybe NAU or Oklahoma State. And the same goes for Tulsa. Michael Powers, Isaac Akers, Shea McAvoy, and Cormac Dalton are great, number 1 through 4. They've been spectacular this season. And with a number 5 who could finish inside the top 60, top 70, I think this Tulsa team could also assert themselves into that top 4 finish. And then you mentioned Wisconsin. I think Notre Dame has a chance to shake it up on a really good day. Methner, Stuzzi, and Solomon are great top 3. But those are the teams I like out of there. But since we have that out of the way, we can narrow our focus a little bit more on the top 4 teams who we've kind of all had this opinion at the beginning of the season. It would come down to these 4. So moving back to just focusing on these 4, who do you think is going to have the edge on everyone entering the last day of the year?
Well, I think it's Stanford. As I said, for the same reasons before, that top 3 is really, really good, better than anyone else has. And I think their 4 and 5 have shown more than everyone else. BYU's been pretty close, but I think the advantage of the top 3 is probably enough to set them apart. For
sure. I do think Stanford should be the favorite entering this one. They've done nothing but prove it. And at the beginning of the preseason, it came down to Oklahoma State and Stanford for me. I not only believed in Stanford's 3-headed monster or Alex Mayer's ability to be a low stick, but I fell in love with the depth these two teams had. I felt like Thomas Boyden was going to be the next up-and-coming star who's, I think, slightly on his way to doing that. And I figured I.C. Rodriguez and the combination with him, Shea Foster, Ryan Shoppy, Victor Shitsama would really come together this year. Just hasn't done so. But I also have said from the start, I don't trust this NAU roster to get it done against Stanford. And as great as Stanford's been all year, and they should be the outright favorites, I'm not going to take Stanford. I'm going to go kind of lean towards BYU here. I love this team. They start with Casey Kleiner. He's a great low stick. And they also have a great 2 through 7. Joey Noakes, Christian Allen, Brandon Garnica, Creed, and Davin Thompson, Aiden Troutner. They really round out this potent 2 through 7. And I really think they're all capable of earning All-American honors and, more importantly, finishing ahead of Stanford's 4 and 5. And kind of like how I've referenced, and you've mentioned it too, I do think this battle comes down to Stanford and BYU. But I think the biggest battle inside the race is going to be how many runners can BYU put in between Stanford's 4 or in between their 3 and 5. I think that's where the race is going to be on Saturday. Wouldn't be surprised to see NAU, who's been super hot recently, steal it, or Oklahoma State to somehow win this one. But I do think it comes down to BYU and Stanford. And like I said, I'm going with BYU. I know that's a lot to digest. It's going to be a loaded championship weekend. But we're going to trace back to the last question I had for you in the individual side of things. This is the easiest question of all, or the most fun at least. Who do you think is going to win the individual championship on the men's side? So again, kind of circling back to where we were, but I do want to get your opinion on that race.
Yeah, individual, I would think it's one of the hardest questions, actually, because that's probably the most open race of the 4. I would go Nico Young. I picked him before the season. He's run 13:11. I think he's probably the most talented guy in the field, and I really like how he runs cross country, especially on this course. We know he can suffer. You're going to have to suffer on this course. If he was 4th here 2 years ago, I think he's a better runner than he was 2 years ago. He's my pick for the win.
Yeah, he's a safe pick, and having heard how difficult the course is at Stillwater, I'm leaning towards Alex Mayer for the same reason. I think the win at Cowboy Jamboree was enough for me to feel confident in him as a runner, and having been able to train through much of the season, work out on this course, it gives him a big advantage heading into the biggest race of the year. And although Nico Young's been tearing it up recently, probably the hottest runner entering this race, I am going to give the edge to Alex Mayer. But that's all I have for the main portion of the show. However, I did ask a few followers the other day on my Instagram a few questions to ask on the show, so I did gather a few of those, and the first one is going to be from Betsy Horder. She's asking, who will be the most unexpected breakout this week, whether it's from the men or women's races or individual team aspects? Who do you think has the most unexpected breakout and why?
Well, it's unexpected. It's kind of hard to predict that, right? Because otherwise, if we knew who it was, I'd be able to say easily. One guy I like a fair amount is Duncan Hamilton, who is the runner for Montana State. He was second at NCAA's in the steeple. He ran 8:18. So I don't know if you would call what he is capable of a breakout, but in terms of cross country, he hasn't. I don't think he's sort of being talked about on the same level as some of these guys. But he did win pre-nats. I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a big race. On the women's side, I mean, again, Natalie Cook, she's a freshman, so I don't know. I think automatically you could say, oh, she's in the top 5. Maybe that's a breakout, but she won already this year at Cowboy Jamboree, so maybe she's not the favorite. Sorry, maybe she's not a big breakout candidate, but yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Maybe Isaiah Sturry as well from Notre Dame. I like him. He was the top freshman at the Nutty Cone meet, and I think that was pretty impressive to me. He finished ahead of Colin Solomon at that race. And Colin Solomon, I guess, is that's another possibility because we haven't really seen him take that leap with a huge race yet this fall. But he was one of the top prospects, certainly, last year in high school. So I think that might be a good candidate. I don't know if it's totally unforeseen given his pedigree in high school, but he's some guy. If he finishes like 15th, would we be shocked with the talent he has?
Yeah, I think Carter Solomon's definitely worthy of that nomination. I think he's going to have a very good day and compete for one of those top 15, maybe even top 10 finishes. I kind of took a look at the women's individual side more closely. I think Addie Engel from Ohio State is someone we're not really necessarily considering a championship favorite, but she is someone that's had a really good season. She's finished first or second in every race this season, and she's only lost to 2 individuals this year, Parker Valby and Emily Venters from Utah. And she's anchored this Ohio State women's team to their first NCAA championship berth since 2019. She's helped reignite this program. They have a lot of really good talent on that team. I think Engel, she's going to run well, as does this Ohio State squad at Nationals, and she's going to lock in an All-American finish, which would be the first time a woman from Ohio State does it since 1986. Which was kind of shocking to me, considering their history. But at Engel, I'm going with her for my dark horse on the women's side. And that's actually where our second question goes into from Thomas Liking. He said he's asking, who is the ultimate dark horse on the men's individual side?
I'm going to go with Haftu Strinzos of Villanova. And again, I don't know if he totally qualifies. He was top 10 last year, but he hasn't done a ton this year, but he's got the talent, and I think he's a guy who no one's really discussing where he could be top 10 again. I wouldn't be totally surprised. So I'm going to say Villanova's Haftu Strinzos.
Yeah, it's a great pick. He hasn't really been the runner we expected him to, but we all know what he's capable of. I went a similar direction. I'm going Nicholas Scudder from Charlotte, who I believe would be the ultimate dark horse for me. You mentioned him earlier. He's been undefeated this year, with the lone exception being his loss to Victor Kiprop at Joe Pine. And his team has just missed out on nationals. And although we haven't talked about Charlotte or him very much this season, he's one of the best runners in the country. He took down a loaded field in the XC23 Invitational, going 23 flat through 8K by himself for the most part. And this is, even though this is only his second NCAA cross-country championships, he ran here in Stillwater back when the championship was here during that COVID season. And that's what I think makes him the ultimate underdog. He goes to a school with a less pedigree than the other contenders. He has relatively little championship experience, and it allows him to kind of go under the radar and be a legitimate championship contender when the time comes on Saturday. So I don't think he's going to win this one, but he is someone I think everyone should have their eye on. Don't be surprised if he has a good day. But as far as questions go, that's all I've got. Jonathan, you've been incredible. I appreciate you hopping on the show today, and I look forward to seeing how our predictions pan out this weekend.
Yeah, hopefully a couple of those dark horses deliver for us. Otherwise, I might, people will be questioning the expertise. But yeah, I enjoyed chatting with you, and looking forward to some great races.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed talking some cross country with you, but that's all I got for you guys today. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Outside the Oval for some exciting content leading up to the National Championship, and exclusively on Twitter for live updates from Stillwater, Oklahoma on Saturday. Also, be sure to follow Jonathan on Twitter as well at jgault13. But that's it from me. I'll catch you guys all next time outside the Oval.